Bedfordshire male rights activist Mike Buchanan is campaigning with the Justice for Men and Boys Party to bring an end to male circumcision here in the UK. They argue the practice is cruel, it's unnecessary, and when it's applied to boys, it is abusive, as babies are unable to consent to what's being done. They've already taken their protest to Parliament Square.
Today is International Men's Day, and we're launching a campaign to abolish circumcision, to stop the chop. Female genital mutilation was quite rightly abolished some time ago, and I'm curious to know why male genital mutilation has not also been abolished.
So you wouldn't do the same for women, obviously rightly so. It's a disgusting thing to do, to cut a baby's genitals, but for some bizarre reason doing it to little boys is totally acceptable.
I was aware of circumcision, but not aware of the issues around circumcision and the harm and the detriment that it does to boys and later to men in later life. This is a travesty. If I want to have myself cut, then that's a choice that I can make as an adult.
I've come here today to register my disapproval of the assault that takes place against boys and very young men, particularly those who are unable to protect themselves, to protest, or to give consent, which they cannot do because they're too young. And I think perhaps one of the worst things about it as well is that there is money involved in this process. Assaulting people for money, it needs to stop.
Male rights activists there protesting alongside Bedfordshire activist Mike Buchanan. But I'm interested to know from you, what do you make of his campaign? Does he have your support? Maybe you've thought for years, it's most peculiar, that families are allowed to pay for specialists to ultimately cut the foreskins of their babies, and you think it's about time we challenge this practice. Maybe circumcision is a totally normal part of life for you and your family, and you frankly find it offensive that people like Mike compare what you consider to be a meaningful and spiritual rite of passage with the mutilation of young girls. And if you've been circumcised yourself, why was it done? And has it ever been an issue for you? Your stories and your views, please, on 03459 455 555. You can text on 81333, start your text with 3CR, and you can email jvsshow@bbc.co.uk. I want to know, do you support the anti-circumcision Stop the Chop campaign? So Mike is in the studio with me now. Good morning to you, Mike. Thanks for coming in.
Good morning, John. It's a pleasure.
What is the fundamental problem that you have with circumcision?
Well, there are several fundamental problems. The first one is perhaps something that surprises people, that male circumcision or male genital mutilation, whatever we call it today, is unquestionably illegal in the UK. It would need a parliamentary override to not be illegal. And no such parliamentary override exists. And we know from Freedom of Information requests that we've sent, for example, to the Home Office, asking why the police are not prosecuting, given that there's no question that male circumcision is illegal. And they avoid the question. They do not deny that it is illegal, but they don't prosecute.
Why is it illegal? Because that's news to me.
Because it's a physical assault. It's illegal from at least the time of the 1861 Offences Against a Person Act, so that's 155 years.
But aren't there religious kind of get-outs for this?
No. There is in the courts, or the Criminal Code of England and Wales, no exemption whatsoever for religious or cultural considerations. None.
So it's already against the law.
It is unquestionably against the law, and the government is not denying that it's against the law.
Why do you want it to be enforced then, and why do you want the law to be upheld?
I want it to be upheld because male circumcision leads to a great deal of suffering. It sometimes leads to death from the operation itself. There are quite a few cases of that. There are cases
in this country.
In this country, indeed, and also, a number of suicides have been attributed to it. It causes grave physical and psychological harm. But it is also a human rights abuse. Male circumcision flies in the face of United Nations and European Union conventions on the rights of the child. So it's illegal, it's barbaric. Why are we allowing people to carve their religions into the genitals of 8-day-old babies?
But they are their babies, aren't they? So
that's giving those babies no human rights. Why don't we allow those parents to carve a big J or a big M on the foreheads of their children?
Ultimately, though, parents make all kinds of decisions as far as they are concerned for the well-being of their child. I mean, for example, vaccinations. You're sticking a needle into a baby's arm, and you would do that on the basis that you hope the good overrides the bad.
But there's no good. There are no medical reasons whatsoever for carrying out non-therapeutic male circumcision, and all the arguments that are used for it, Jonathan, fall apart when you talk about female genital mutilation. Would we be okay with parents inflicting genital mutilation on their daughters? Of course we wouldn't. Apart from anything else, it's been specifically illegal since 1985. So if it's not okay culturally or religiously to mutilate the genitals of baby girls, why is it okay to mutilate the genitals of baby boys?
Let me ask that question to Simon Hochhauser, who is co-chairman of Miller UK, an organisation which is set up by the Jewish community to protect and promote its right to carry out circumcision. Good morning to you, Simon. Thanks for coming on.
Good morning to you. You're welcome.
Would you like to just respond to that very point? Why is it acceptable to do it to boys when you would agree, I'm sure, that to circumcise girls would be absolutely abhorrent in this country?
It is abhorrent. It is abhorrent. It's a complete mutilation. It is barbaric. And indeed, to state that circumcision is illegal, then you have to ask yourself the question why there's a specific law on female genital mutilation. There is a specific law because circumcision is legal in this country, as it is legal across Europe and across the world.
Nonsense.
It's a question of degree. There are many practices that are carried out on young children for cosmetic reasons. Ear piercing could be deemed, under Mike's view, an assault and illegal. It is not illegal. Taking out the emotion here, it's not barbaric. It doesn't create suicides. There have been instances where people have been suicidal for all sorts of reasons, which would not be declared, if we were to carry out that practice, illegal, simply because people have, in very, very few instances, been suicidal. So it's important to get this into context. Female genital mutilation is barbaric. It's the partial or complete removal of the female genitalia. It's subjugates...
Simon, you appear to be woefully ignorant about FGM. There are 4 types described by the WHO, and you are, as usual, just looking at the most extreme variant. Two types of female genital mutilation are equivalent to MGM.
All types of FGM are illegal, it is true. The prosecutions that take place on the more egregious forms of FGM, it includes type 4, which in the view of Justice Mumby in a recent case, cannot be used as the basis of declaring male circumcision illegal. And you know that, Mike, and you've seen that judgment. And therefore, to compare circumcision to female genital mutilation, which is understood to be the more egregious forms of female genital mutilation and where prosecutions have taken place.
I'm sorry, you are just...
Mike, I've heard you, and I've listened to you, and I would like to finish, is to distort the arguments between circumcision and FGM.
But can I just jump in and ask a question from a logical perspective? I mean, okay, if we accept what you say, Simon, that female genital mutilation is very kind of excessive and very extreme, and it is something that is, as you describe yourself, barbaric, how can taking the skin of a child's genitals and cutting that skin off, how can that be justified by you as not being barbaric?
It has to be seen in the context of which it is done. And indeed, it's not just practiced out in religious communities. It's practiced in North America, for example, by a very large proportion of families on their male children. It has to be seen in the context. It's not barbaric because the question of degree has to be understood. Where you are restricting the sexual practice of females, where you are subjugating women by removing parts of their genitalia, that is clearly barbaric. In the instance here, we're talking about a practice which is not dissimilar to other practices that we have on children without their consent. Cosmetic surgery, where parents take a decision for their children. As I mentioned earlier, ear piercing. It's a little bit like distinguishing between ear piercing on the one hand or hacking off an ear with a rusty saw blade.
But explain to me...
One is barbaric and one is not barbaric.
But explain to me and everybody else listening to the programme this morning why you think it's necessary.
It's necessary for a number of reasons. In order for a person to be very much part, an active part, and culturally part of the Jewish community, as has been accepted over millennia, and is not even controversial across the various practices within the Jewish religion, it is important that this practice is carried out.
It is very controversial among the people who were circumcised at 8 days old and became atheists, joined other religions. You are carving your religion into the genitals of babies.
Well, this is again an emotive carving.
It's not emotive. It is exactly what you are doing and what you are justifying.
As I said earlier, it's an emotive term, carving your religion into the emotive, because we would not declare it as such.
But of course you wouldn't. Of course you wouldn't. But that's what you are doing.
Finish my point. It is not carving your religion into the genitals of babies, and it is not common amongst people who have been circumcised at 8 days to say that they have rejected this particular practice. There are cases, clearly, as there are in all situations, where a small number of people have objected to the particular practice. But if there is one practice in the Jewish community that is consensual across the various divisions within the Jewish community, and we are healthily divided, it is that of circumcision. There is unanimity.
But explain to me, as a man who has not been circumcised, why it is necessary. From a logical perspective, take religion out of it for 1 second. From a logical perspective, why is it necessary?
Well, I can't take religion out of it because it's central to the point that we're making.
But why not? Surely any religion that dictates it should take place, there should be a reason behind it.
Well, it's derived from Scripture, as is all our religious practice, and it's developed in terms of its practice.
But lots of things are derived from Scripture that was a very long time ago. Explain to me why it is necessary, where the logic is behind that decision to do it.
Those practices that are derived from Scripture that are carried out today through rabbinic interpretation are relevant today as they were at that time. I'm not going to go into a discussion here about which religious practices derived from Scripture are relevant or practiced today and which are not. But clearly this one, as I said earlier...
But why is it necessary? Why is it necessary?
It's necessary as part of the right of entry into our culture, as part of being part of our culture and part of our religion. That is why it is. That is like...
But maybe your culture and your religion... Is it not possible to raise the question, maybe your culture and your religion is wrong?
It is perfectly permissible, and indeed one should have that debate. But we would maintain that it is correct. That is why we carry out...
But you're not explaining from a logical perspective. You're not justifying it with any logic. I mean, if you were saying, well, it's much more health advantageous to a child if the boy has his foreskin cut off, then okay. But you're not giving us any logical basis for that decision.
Jonathan, perhaps I can explain.
Is that for a boy to continue to be an active part of a culture and a religion, it's not a matter of logic. It is a fact that to be part of our religion and to play a role in its culture...
So it is illogical.
There's no question of logic. Religion, and when you're arguing logic against religion, we're not talking about here a health practice. We're talking about part of a culture and part of a religion.
So what's the medical reason for doing it?
Non-controversial within the religion. It is non-controversial and has never been controversial in wider
Simon,
I mentioned...
Please, Simon, you know and I know what the purpose of male circumcision is. And we know it from at least the 12th century, from the writings of a senior rabbi. The purpose of male circumcision is to take away flesh that will give a great deal more pleasure during sex in adult men. The entire purpose of male circumcision is to reduce the sexual pleasure felt by adult men. And you know it and I know it.
Well, you know it, but I don't know that. It's the first I've heard of that.
Nonsense. Absolute nonsense.
Again, let me finish.
Where do you get that from? Because I'd heard, and my understanding was that religions, such as the Jewish religion, they had that idea because you're going back a long time ago, and for hygiene reasons, it may well have had some kind of basis. There
is no hygiene reason whatsoever to support male circumcision. It takes no more time for a man to clean his genitals with soap and water, whether he's circumcised or not. There is just no hygiene reason.
John, our religious practices are not based necessarily on health reasons or logical reasons. We base our religion